So I've been trying to figure out how to broach this topic for a very long time. I finally decided that it was so wide and important that it just simply needed its own video. For me, it all started when I was writing this video. I realized that all of my favorite books, all of the books on my to-be-read list, were all written by men. And that realization was startling and disheartening for me. All of my favorite books were written by men in a time period in which I would never have wanted to live in as a woman. Why was I advocating for all of these authors when the likelihood is they never would have advocated for me? And that's of course not to say that having made that realization, they are no longer my favorite books. They still have merit, they still have incredible journeys, incredible plots, incredible writing styles. I still love them tremendously. But after that realization, I definitely have to re-examine the way that I read. I was thinking back to my education, my time in the American public school system, and I also realized that we had never, ever been assigned a text or novel, book, or memoir for that matter by a female author or even about the female experience in the entirety of my primary education curriculum. That hole in my education is the size of half the world's population. To be fair, we did briefly look at Emily Dickinson's poetry, but only in contrast to Walt Whitman. It's ridiculous. Instead, we read about women in other ways, such as Daisy in The Great Gatsby, who is nothing more than an object, a possession of love and sex and intimacy that the other male character simply cannot have. Or even that one prostitute in The Catcher in the Rye who, I think her name was Sunny, I don't even know. Was she even given a name? It's looking back on things like these that it's no wonder that people like Andrew Tate have been so successful on their misogynistic YouTube tirade. The female voice simply isn't as valued in Western culture as the male ones. And this is my hot take of the year, but I think at least part of the reason why people see women as more emotionally understanding than men, this is a generalization based off of sociology, is not because biologically we are meant to be caregivers, we are meant to have babies, but because we are forced to put ourselves out of our own context, especially in education, and get in touch with other perspectives, unlike men, for example, in the American education school system. They identify in a large way with every single character of every single text that we read. I frequently read it pretty consistently. And one thing I noticed time and time again is that these men, these boys, are going to subreddits like r/askmen. They're going to male-dominated groups to ask about how to approach a woman romantically, or how to approach women at all. And it just boggles my mind that these guys would rather ask other men about how to approach women than women on how to approach women. It just further creates a divide between genders, basically. A personal example of this I have is that I took a class in university about forgotten female scientists throughout history. It was technically a science credit, even though there wasn't any sort of lab element. This class was known as the Easy A class of the science credits. It was basically a history class. But anyways, of the 30 plus student roster list, there was not a single male presenting student. Not one. I remember feeling almost like betrayed that men could not even muster so much interest in women to succeed at an easy A-level class. They could not acknowledge the important gaps in their own education, and to make matters much worse, one of my closest friends at the time, who was male, tried to argue with me that women in STEM today do not have the same issues as women in STEM back then. Yeah, you're right, now we can vote. But I would also like to point out that the most recent forgotten female scientist was 2013. And it's like, how can you talk to me about an experience that you have no part in? Is there a better example of willful ignorance? Yes, there is. So again, I've touched this topic in a few other videos, but going back to the intro of this video, not only were all of my favorite books written by men, about men, for men, they were white men. So in my rage that the other half had forgotten about the world's largest minority, I had also simultaneously forgotten about every single other voice except for the white American. I was also isolating myself as somebody who is only interested in learning about people who have experiences that are close or resembling mine. I never had to read a Toni Morrison book for school, so I simply didn't. I never had to learn about other races, other ways of life, other cultures, other languages. So for the most part, I simply didn't. Now, of course, that's not to say that I now know everything about everyone. I am clearly not a person of color. I will never know what it's like to be a person of color, but the very least I can do is try to understand, at least through literature, a infinitesimal part of what it could possibly be like, especially in the country that I live in, during the time period that I live in. And it bothers me that I never tried to get a better insight as to what it is like for others. Putting aside for a moment my unwittingly perpetuation of this, it is absolutely egregious that my education began and ended in white America. I will never forget that each year of our history classes was a different part of an American history, keeping in mind that America was first charted by the Europeans only about 5 centuries ago. That's not a lot of history to squeeze into 12 years of education. My world history class wasn't about world history at all. It was about America versus the world. We learned that Americans won the Vietnam War. Just like the androcentrism was so blatant to me, white American centrism was not yet clear. As somebody who takes advantage of white American centricism, it was not on my radar. And again, I don't want to sit here and blame the government or my education for not instilling like this inherent curiosity about others within me. It is, I've been out of public school for 4 years now, 5 years now. I'm a big girl, I can read what I want, and I just never gave myself the opportunity. In another video, I would really like to take a quick look-see at the banned book list. I think you will be shocked and surprised as to what you might find there. So one final note on the conversation that I will say is that I'm sure there is some degree of white guilt involved with this realization, with the way that I now read, and I think to some degree there should be. So basically, to wrap all this up, I have taken a hard look into the way that I live, the things that I read, the way I spend my time, and all I can do is attempt to educate myself better and hopefully inspire someone else to do the same. I am well aware that I likely take advantage in so many ways, the privilege that I have, my privilege of being in this beautiful city, of being who I am. I think one thing we can learn from this is to just take a look at yourself and look at the things, even small things like diversifying your reading lists, things that can at least attempt to widen your worldview. And that's certainly not meant to be preachy. It's just how it is, I guess. Well, I hope that this has been insightful for somebody. I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful life. Love you, bye.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.